Do you think that President Obama has intensified this threat? I mean, now with the $1 trillion plan to, quote, modernize the nuclear arsenal?
It's a very bad step. And it's not just modernizing the arsenal, which ought to be reduced. It's worth remembering we have even a legal obligation to cut back and ultimately eliminate nuclear weapons. But it's also something you mentioned earlier, developing these small nuclear weapons. Sounds kind of nice. They're small, not big. It's the opposite. Small nuclear weapons provide a temptation to use them, figuring, well, it's only a small weapon, so it won't destroy, a whole city. But as soon as you use a small nuclear weapon, chances of retaliation escalate pretty sharply. And that means you could pretty soon be in a situation where you're having a real nuclear exchange. Pretty well known now that that would lead to a nuclear winter, which would make life essentially impossible.
As President Obama heads to Hiroshima, do you think he should be apologizing for the only nuclear bombs, atomic bombs, dropped in the world, the U.S. dropping them, launching the nuclear age on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in '45?
I thought, I'm old enough to remember it, and that day was just maybe the grimmest day I can remember. Then came something even worse, the bombing of Nagasaki, mainly to try to test a new weapon design. These are real horror stories. The firebombing of Japanese cities a couple months earlier was not that much better, Tokyo especially. We might even recall that there was what was called a grand finale in the Air Force history after the 2 atom bombs, after Russia had entered the war, which ended any Japanese hope for any kind of, any hope that they had for any sort of negotiated settlement. After that, it was all over. After Japan had officially surrendered, though before it had been made public. After that, the U.S. organized a 1,000-plane raid, which was a big logistic feat, to bomb Japanese cities, to kind of show the Japs who was on top, and survivors, like Makoto Oda, a well-known Japanese writer, recently died, reported that as a child in Osaka, he remembers bombs falling along with leaflets saying Japan has surrendered. Now, that was not a lethal bombing, but it was a brutal one, a sign of brutality. All of these events call for serious rethinking. Yes, apology, but mainly serious rethinking of just what we're up to in the world. And remember that this goes on. Those were small bombs by today's standards. If you look at the record since 1945, it's an absolute miracle that we survived. New examples are discovered all the time. Just a couple of months ago, it was revealed that in 1979, last Carter year, the U.S. automated detection systems determined that there was a major Russian missile attack against the United States. Protocol is this goes to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they evaluate it, goes to the National Security Advisor, speaking of Brzezinski at the time, he notifies the president. Brzezinski was actually on the phone, ready to call Carter to launch a nuclear attack, which means the doomsday clock goes to midnight, on the phone when they received information saying that it was a false alarm. Another of the hundreds, if not thousands, of false alarms. On the Russian side, there are probably many more because their equipment is much worse. These things happen constantly. And to play games with escalating the nuclear arsenal when it should be reduced, sharply reduced. I mean, even people like Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, and so on are calling for elimination of nuclear weapons. To escalate and modernize at this point is just really criminal, in my opinion.